Next, I believe it's the Canadian Constitution Foundation.
Mr. Sloly, good afternoon. My name is Sujit Chaudhary. I am counsel for the CCF. I'd like to begin my questions to you by returning to the theme of your conversation with my friend, Ms. Nygaard, from the Government of Canada. And I think that my recollection is that you agreed with her that there was no need for the OPS, or for that matter, for the City of Ottawa, to reach out to the OPP or the province first before going to the RCMP for assistance. It was perfectly appropriate for the OPS to go to the RCMP directly in parallel with outreach to the OPP, because Ottawa is the seat of the federal government and of federal institutions.
Up until the last comment around the seat of anything, my comments were exactly that. At that time, I was trying to get resources from any source, and I didn't have a priority in my mind as to what sequence I should go through. I was simply actioning a series of requests to agencies that were large enough and near enough to provide immediate resource relief to what we were facing at that time.
Good. So let me take you back to when you dramatically increased your request for resources. And I'm speaking here of the February 7th letters, one sent to the province, one sent to the federal government. I'd like to focus on the federal letter, if I may. So it was a letter from Chair Deans and Mayor Watson to Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister Mendocino. And I won't call it up because we've seen it a number of times, but it's true. Is it true that in that letter that was based on your advice, that a request was made for a total of 1,800 additional officers from other police forces in Canada?
I believe the number was 1,790 and change. 1,800 has become the rounded number. And some 100 of those resources were civilian, but yes, substantially yes.
And is it true, approximately, that about 1/3 of that number was to come from each of the RCMP, the OPP, and other municipal forces?
I never put those restrictions on there. I've never heard those numbers, those divisions of responsibility until you've just put it to me now.
But Mayor Watson put it that way to Prime Minister Trudeau.
In the letter?
No, in a phone call with him on Friday.
I have no idea what that conversation was, sir.
Well, and so how many RCMP officers did you wish to be deployed from that 1,800?
I never put a percentage or a number against it, sir.
Okay. So, Commissioner, I'd seek leave to pull up the interview summary for Minister Bill Blair and to show it to Mr. Sloly, if I may.
Okay, well, that's unusual. Is there any objection? So maybe we can see again, that will not be entered as an exhibit in the normal course. It'll just be referred to and wouldn't go in as an exhibit until Minister Blair comes to testify. And so go ahead and we'll see if there's any problem.
Sure. So this is, Mr. Registrar, this is witness summary 48. And could you please go to page 5? And so let's just stop there. So, Mr. Sloly, I take it you've never seen this document.
No, I haven't.
So we're going to take a little bit of time to let you read a couple of passages. So the first passage I'd like to direct you to is the paragraph that states, Minister Blair explained there were 2 problems with the mayor's request for resources. And then in the next paragraph I'll summarize for you, he speaks to the issue of planning and the need for a comprehensive plan in order for the OPS to receive assistance from the OPP and RCMP. That's not what I want to focus you on. It's the next paragraph. So if you could scroll up, please, to the paragraph that begins. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
I thought I was being asked to read something.
Please,
now
go
you're
ahead.
Scrolling away from it.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain everything to me and then have me read everything?
I'm just summarizing that one paragraph, but I want to ask you questions about the following paragraph.
I'm in your hands, so I can start reading now or just wait till you finish summarizing and then read everything.
Well, why don't you read these 2 paragraphs, and I'd like to ask you about the second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've read as much as what's on the page here.
So I want to ask you some questions about that second paragraph. So Minister Blair, would you agree that in that paragraph he makes 2 points? First, that in his view, the OPS was required to go to the OPP first before requesting assistance from the RCMP. And second, that the Police Services Act requires the OPS to go to the OPP first before going to the RCMP.
What's the question? Sorry.
So do you agree that that's what he says?
It's a bit confusing because in all my times in the Toronto Police Service, when he was a chief, that was never the case.
Okay, well, I want to ask you some questions about that. So before we get there, I want to talk about and ask you some questions about the tripartite meetings that took place on February 7th, 8th, and 10th. And if you were at 2 of those meetings, February 7th, where you came a little bit late, and February 8th.
I was at, I think, 4 or 5 of those meetings.
So Mr. Sloly, I'm sorry, in the course of the Commission's work, we've referred to 3 of those meetings, 7th, 8th, and 10th. So let me focus your attention on those 3 or
That's
those
fine,
2.
but I was at far more of those meetings.
Sure. So let's go to, if we could, Mr. Registrar, if you could please call up the readout for the February 7th meeting, and the document is PBNSC CAN 2335. So, Mr. Sloly, have you seen this document before?
What's on the page here doesn't.
If you could scroll down, please, Mr.
No, I've never seen this before.
Okay, so this is a readout from this call. If you go down to page 4, please. So go back up a bit. And so here is an exchange between Minister Blair, BB, and you. And I would just want to focus on the last exchange here.
What's the date on this, sir?
We've been told that this is a readout from a call that took place on February 7th.
February 7th?
Correct.
The only recollection I have of a direct conversation with Minister Blair was on the last weekend. But I may be wrong, so sorry, continue on.
Well, let me ask you a question based on this evidence.
Sure.
And so there's an exchange here at the end where you discuss how you have great respect for former Chief, now Minister Blair, and Minister Blair says, "We are working to provide the city with the resources you require. That is our sole intent. There will be follow-up conversations. We will be here for you." I take it you don't recall that exchange.
No, I don't recall that exchange. Okay. I recall a different exchange on a different date.
What date was that?
I just haven't been able to find it in any of the notes yet, but it was either the Saturday or the Sunday, so of the last weekend in office. So what would that be, the 12th and 13th? Maybe the 14th, maybe, but I think it was more the 12th and 13th.
Okay, well, let's get to that in a minute. So, but would you agree here that in this record of this exchange you had with Minister Blair, he didn't raise with you the concern that the request was somehow problematic because you had not gone to the OPP first or you hadn't complied with the Police Services Act?
That's correct. In what's transcribed here, and certainly my recollection of the other conversation, at neither of those times were those concerns raised to me.
Okay. And so...
or anything about a plan or not having a plan or not having a good enough plan raised.
And Mr. Sloly, I'll ask you to come back to that in just a minute. Mr. Registrar, could you please take us to the readout from the February 8th tripartite meeting? And the document number is SSM NSC CAN 2052.
Council, is it a February 8th meeting?
Yes, it is. You have it. Thank you.
We've had excellent service with our document.
Yes, we have. So if you could scroll down to, this is another readout, Mr. Sloly, and if you could scroll down, please, to page 4. The participants in this call were yourself, BB, who's Minister Blair, MM, who's Minister Mendocino, and others. And I'd like to take you to the last exchange between yourself and Minister Blair, where it begins. On the RCMP, only 20 have been sworn in. The rest are with Rideau Cottage, which of course refers to where the Prime Minister's residence is, and the precinct, which I assume refers to the parliamentary precinct. I need more. And then Minister Blair says, for how long are you asking resources? And then it's not attributed to you, but I think it's reasonable to infer that the 5 to 7 days answer came from you.
I wouldn't say 5 to 7 days, sir.
You wouldn't have?
No, not at that point.
But you would agree that these notes state that you said we need more RCMP officers, only 20 have been sworn in.
Yes, that was
Okay.
that was part of the challenge in terms of getting RCMP getting sworn in.
And you'll agree that, so when Minister Blair asked you for how long are you asking resources, he did not raise with you the concern that you were going to the RCMP first or not going to the OPP first, and you were not complying with the Police Services Act.
That's correct, sir, but I just a note for the commissioner. This is the first time I'm seeing these documents. I'm not debating the content of it, but I just haven't had a chance to read through them to see the context and to situate myself in it. So I'm answering your questions as best as my recollection can be stimulated from these documents, but they're the first time I'm seeing them, sir.
Of course, Mr. Sloly, and we're doing our best here given the limited time we have available to you. Mr. Sloly, you referred to a third conversation you had.
Yes, sir.
With Minister Blair. Would you be able to tell us a bit about that conversation on these themes?
Yes, so again, my recollection is that this other conversation takes place on the last weekend that I'm in office. So this is Saturday, Sunday, potentially Monday, the 14th of February. I was late coming onto the call. Ministers Mendocino and Blair were on the call. There were others, and sort of kind of waited in until things turned around towards me. And then I recall there was an exchange between the two ministers. Minister Mendocino indicated that he would leave the commentary to Minister Blair, and then he proceeded to ask me two questions. The first question was whether or not we had considered using bylaw enforcement to address some of the challenges that we were facing here. I thought it was an odd question, and so I said, yes, we've actually issued hundreds, if not thousands, of bylaw enforcement tickets, but that any level of enforcement was difficult, both in terms of the potential volatility of public safety impacts and the resource restrictions. He then asked a second question as to whether or not we considered towing trucks or vehicles. And I said, yes, we towed hundreds of vehicles and we'd actually towed some heavy trucks. But again, there's an extreme volatility around that type of enforcement action, and that we had resource challenges with the tow trucks, particularly heavy trucks. And that was the sum total of it.
But he never raised these procedural objections that he appears to have been raising now.
Neither the procedural objections or the concerns around the plan or lack thereof a plan.
So, Mr. Sloly, how long have you been or were you a police officer in Ontario?
I think just over 30 years in total in two different police services.
And so you're familiar with the Police Services Act?
Yes, sir.
And is there any provision in Section 9 of the Police Services Act that requires a municipal chief of police to go first to the OPP before seeking assistance from the RCMP?
Not that I'm aware of, and I stand to be corrected by lawyers who understand the Act better than I ever will. But as I said, my practical experience has been over the course of those 30 years in two police services, and for a substantial amount of time where I actually performed that function for Chief Blair, that if we needed help, we went to the best agency available where we were likely to get the best help from. I wasn't directed to, nor did I have a system where I had to reference Section 9 and call the commissioner of the day from the OPP, and then through that process find my way to the right resource. I would call north of Steeles and say, hey, York Region, can you send us a public order unit? I'd call west of the 427, hey, Peel, can you send us a public order unit? I'd call over past the zoo and say, hey, Durham, can you send us a public order unit? And they would do the same thing, and we would do that in reciprocity. I'd never before seen any reference to Section 9 of the Police Services Act.
And Mr. Sloly, RCMP officers can be sworn in as special constables
That's my understanding, sir.
pursuant to Section 53, Sub 1 of the Police Services Act.
I'll trust you on the section.
And as far as you know, there's no condition for swearing in an RCMP officer as a special constable that a request must first be made to the OPP.
I'm not aware of that, sir.
And now, Mr. Sloly, if we had more time, I would take you to the RCMP Act. But I'd put it to you that there is no provision of the RCMP Act that requires a local police force to go first to its provincial police force if there is one.
I'll trust you in that, sir. I have no understanding of the RCMP Act.
And so would you say, Mr. Sloly, that at best, so there is no federal or provincial law, there's no RCMP policy, there's no OPP policy that required the OPS to go to the OPP first?
I'm not aware of any of those things, sir. I've just used a practice that was long established and never previously challenged by any level of government or any other police service.
And Mr. Sloly, do you wish that these concerns about procedure had been raised with you at the time so you could have responded to them?
That would have been the fair thing to do, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Sloly.
Thank you.